welcome to the October RASC Edmonton Center monthly meeting. I'll be your host and current presiding president, J.A. Lavender, and lots of good things in the meeting tonight. So let's just get things going right away here. So I'd like to now introduce our guest speaker for this month. It's Gordon MacLeod. And Gordon is an astronomer who studied at the University of Alberta for his BSc and Queen's University for his PhD. In the years since, he has had an interesting career path that brought him to South Africa, among other locations. And he is now part of an organization called the Global Emerging Radio Astronomy Foundation, which works towards building telescopes around the world. And tonight he will be telling us more about these projects. So please join me in welcoming Gordon MacLeod.
I'll try to talk as slowly as I possibly can. Regrettably, I speak very quickly, and sometimes you can't understand me, but I will try to talk slowly. Thank you for having me. While we're getting ready, I'll just say that it's very difficult for me to put 25 years of experience traveling through and working in Africa into an hour, but I'll do my best. And I really can't tell you some of the really interesting and cool stories I've gleaned on the way. There's so many people across the continent that are so interesting, but I'll give you a sort of a small taste of it, at least, at best I can, at least through my own experience from it. All right, so please bear with me here. Something else also, I tend to swear a lot, so I'll try not to. Please don't hold it against me. I know I will offend someone somewhere, somehow.
You can just use the arrow.
Oh, great, thank you. Okay, so let's just jump into this. So just as a matter of interest, I'm really trained in radio astronomy, and I don't see myself as an astronomer anymore. I'm really an optical or an operational astronomer. In other words, I spend a lot of my time thinking of ways to better observe. So just to give you some idea, you know, if the telescope is moving, you're not observing, which means you're wasting time. So you want to find ways to do it in a more economical fashion so that you have more time on source and less time slewing, basically. Okay, that's the idea. So nowadays they build telescopes that move incredibly quickly across the sky. In fact, they'll take your head off, the one that we have at Hartreo now. But anyway, so most things I talk about now, it's from an operational aspect. In other words, how can I do better observing? How can I get things? And a lot of that involves building telescopes. This is the Hartreo Hartebistok Radio Astronomy Observatory. When I graduated from Queen's University, I wanted to find some place where I could go to work in the Southern Hemisphere because I did star formation. I looked at the birth of young, massive stars, and most of them were in the southern skies. So visible basically from Australia, South Africa, and places like that. And they, of course, had to have radio telescopes because I wanted to work at an observatory like this one. And luckily, I got a job at this one. It was 1990 when I got the job. So you might recall that was the apartheid era. So in fact, yes, I did work in South Africa during apartheid. At the very end of it, and I got to see some of the, it was an experience. I actually stood in line with my then girlfriend when she voted in the first election that put Nelson Mandela in their presidency. So it was kind of a cool experience, actually. They tried to make me vote. They were saying, we need more white people to vote. And I said, I can't vote, I'm a foreigner. Anyway, they didn't care. Anyways, it was kind of cool. But, you know, and the lines were huge. It was like a massive, I'm going off topic. If I go off topic, we will not finish this talk. Sorry, so I will stop. I'll go on. Anyways, in 1991, I arrived, and you can see me here. I had hair. I lost that in Brazil. I was working in the rainforest at an observatory, and I got some weird tropical disease, and I developed asthma, gout, and I had huge hair loss. It was like I had cancer. It was really weird. My beard grew back, but not my head. I'll live without it. I can live without hair. Anyways, this was me standing at the base of the telescope, at the ladder when you go up to the telescope to do work in the subreflector or in the receiver cabin, which is the cone in the middle of the telescope, with my good friend Mike Gaylord, who unfortunately died about 10 years ago of cancer. He and I, we immediately hit it off because we do the same kind of work. We both did spectroscopy. We both did star formation. And so we were doing about 2,000 hours of observing a year. So for the first 3 years of my astronomy life, after graduating, I did 6,000 hours of observing on this telescope. 6,000 hours. And that's the observing side. For every hour you observe, it takes an hour to process and publish. So you're doing 6,000 hours of processing as well in those 3 years. And then we extended that for a second postdoc, and we did another 3,000 hours of observing. And in that period, we set up what we called our monitoring programs, which then carried on for the last 30 odd years. So we have the longest data set in the world of methanol masers towards massive star forming regions, which we're now using to find things like the accretion rate onto the massive star, how they grow in size. And in fact, in one case, we saw the birth of a star, because you only see methanol towards 8 or 10 solar mass stars or larger. And when the methanol turned on, it meant a star of that mass turned on. So I actually put a birth date to a star of January 1st, 2015, which is kind of cool. You know, so you live for the cool moments. But I did 2,000 hours a year, and it can get pretty damn boring, because you're basically looking at the same things all the time. Anyways, so there are other telescopes, but there was only Hart-Rayl originally, just the one radio telescope, and there were only 7 or 8 of us that actually used the telescope. It was a very small community of astronomers. I mean, this room is more than twice or 3 times the number of radio astronomers in South Africa right now. And so when you do work and research in Africa, you're really on your own. You really have to have sort of a, what's the word we looked for? You had to have that pioneering spirit. You had to go someplace and know you're going to be totally isolated. Everything you did was by yourself. Everything. You fixed the telescope, you did the observing, you processed it, and so on. There was no help. There was no large number of students or nothing like that. So in the beginning, there was just Hart-Rayl. And at some point along the time, I decided I was getting a bit bored, and I decided to leave. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you come to Mexico and work on our 50-meter telescope we're building? And I thought, well, I've never been to Mexico. So I went over there for about 1.5 years, and I got to basically climb the mountain every couple of weeks. So I got to climb up to 4,500 meters on a regular basis. And the cool part about that is there was no roads, there's no telescope, there's nothing up there. So I would see these telescopes before they were telescopes. They were just rocky outcrops on a mountaintop, okay? And that's just really kind of cool. So in fact, in Mexico, I almost killed myself when I was running down the scree field. I almost went off a cliff. There's a drop, like a 25-foot drop at the edge of the scree field. And I hadn't realized it the first time. And I had to hit the brakes real hard, and I had to land on my ass and slide. But luckily, I made it. Anyways, while I was in Mexico, I decided to leave astronomy full stop and do an MBA and start help managing businesses. And I sort of resigned myself to never do astronomy again. I kind of hoped I'd make a bit of money and sort of semi-retire to be an astronomer. And that plan didn't work out. I'm sorry. And I managed companies in Southern Africa, but I got very good at firing people because it fit my personality, because I have a quite aggressive personality. And so I became very good at firing people, and my friends started hiring me to fire people. And it's horrible, because when you fire somebody, they start threatening to kill you or something like this. And I thought they were just saying goodbye after a while. It was that common, you know? Anyways, there's some stuff I thought, I'm not even going to tell. And so one time I got a call from friends, and they said, no, we need you up in Angola. We need you to fix a factory in Angola. So I said, okay, I'll go to Angola. You know, I've never been there. And I get up in this place, and it was like living in a septic tank. It really was. The entire city of Luanda is covered in human filth, like human excrement, because when it rains, the whole city floods with water, and it doesn't go anywhere. So the septic systems all back up. It's horrible. I mean, the disease was unbelievable, you know, all the various diseases, cholera, all sorts of crazy things going on. I saw slavery in Angola. I mean, it was horrible, horrible experience. And then, this is the worst part, then they decided to have me arrested and throw me in prison. So I'm in Angola. I don't speak Portuguese. I could speak Spanish by this time, but I couldn't speak Portuguese. And I got these police trying to take me to prison. And my friends, luckily, my partners in this business, they were able to negotiate an under-the-table payment to get me the hell out of the country. So while I was sitting at the airport in Luanda, thinking to myself, I almost went to prison for doing my job. I thought, what the hell am I doing? I don't even like this stuff. I get threatened all the time. Now they want to send me to jail. And it just made me realize, I had like an epiphany. I said, I got to stop answering my phone. My friends call, they ask me to do stuff. I do it. Anyways, so I realized I wanted to go back into high-tech astronomy type stuff, projects like building telescopes or doing alternative energy. And I stopped all of the firing business. And luckily, I got a job at the South African government when they were in the process of bidding to host the Square Kilometer Array, the world's largest radio telescope, which eventually they did win the right to host the mid to high frequency aspect of that. So we were successful in the end. My job at the DST was threefold. My boss said, Gordon, you're my bullshit detector because I don't know astronomy and the astronomers bullshit me. That's what he said to me. Seppo was a great guy. He was a biologist. Anyways, and he taught me a lot about government, and I had a new respect for people that work in government afterwards. The second part of my job was human capital development. I was to fly into Africa and to help our partner countries develop astronomy programs, which is really cool. I was very keen on that. And the last one was helping with the lobbying strategy for our bid for the SKA. And that one really sort of was the most interesting to me because it involved all the economics I'd learned in business school. And I wasn't talking astronomy for 3 years. I was talking economics most of the time. But one of the things that really interested me was we had to do all these action items coming from the African working group meetings. And one of them was to build a single telescope in each partner country. And that immediately, as soon as you think, 8 countries over 3,000 kilometers with a telescope in each country, you're thinking VLBI, very long baseline interferometry. And that would have been an amazing telescope to build in Africa. And we wanted to build this. And I saw this immediately. I got permission to go to the observatory hard trail, talk to my buddies. They all kind of agreed small 12-meter class telescopes would be okay. We could do geodesy, we could do maser monitoring, etc. But about a week or so later, my friend Mike Gaylord discovered that because of the World Cup of soccer, all of the big telecoms dishes that they used to download data for the internet had become redundant. So now we could get access to these dishes, convert them to radio telescopes because they are radio telescopes. And we could then do an incredibly good VLBI network. You'd have 30-meter class telescopes across the continent of Africa, which would make us the preeminent VLBI network, probably certainly in the Southern Hemisphere. And so that really made it very exciting. But it led to another problem because our partner countries weren't particularly interested in helping us lobby Europeans and Canadians and so on to get support for our SKA bid. And I did what's called a prisoner's dilemma, which basically is a game theory where you figure out how people will make decisions based on their economic return from various options. And it was telling me that they had no interest in helping us because if they helped, they had to put resources towards astronomy, which took that away from AIDS research, food security, water security. And most of the countries, such as Botswana, for instance, or Namibia, they literally had 5 members in their Ministry of Science. So one of those people had to do astronomy, and they just couldn't justify the spend. So they wouldn't do it. Anyways, so I needed to change the equation somehow. And what we decided on was build a telescope. And again, the VLBI story that I'd already been talking about made sense. And so from there, we were able to raise money from the African Renaissance Fund, which is a fund set aside by South Africa to help African countries interact with each other. So they gave us 120 million rand, about $12 million at the time. And with that, we had hoped to build 6 10-meter class telescopes in these countries. And then, of course, my buddy found these big dishes. We gave the money, they started converting them instead. And unfortunately, the people we gave the money to, they spent all of it converting only one dish. So we only did Ghana. So now there are telescopes in South Africa, single dish, and that's Hartrail and Ghana. And Ghana's just been made science ready in the last year, basically. So that was 2010, and now it's taken 13 years to get to an operational telescope. And there's lots of blunders along the way, lots of political mistakes made by various people. And I'm not going to give names, and I'm not going to talk politics, but it really was an unfortunate thing. We only got to one, but that's what gave us the idea for creating our nonprofit foundation, was to raise money to help other African countries and other developing countries to develop radio astronomy programs, because radio astronomy is engineering on steroids, right? Everything in a radio telescope you see, the electronics, the surface, the encoders, everything is ultra high tech. And it's used in all sorts of industries outside of astronomy, like radar or imagery goes into medicine. We know all this. All of us know this. So we were really keen to give people equipment in their own country so that their kids could learn in country and therefore not leave. That every time a student in Africa gets on a plane to go elsewhere to study, the chances of them return goes to almost zero. So the longer you can keep them in an African country, the more likely they will remain working in an African country, leading to an improvement in the education system in that country. So these are some of the things that I learned while working in the government of South Africa. So I'm not just talking astronomy right now, and that's the story. And anyways, so that was really kind of cool, but we only built the one, regrettably. Anyways, there's another telescope called HIREX. It's basically almost identical to CHIME and Penticton, except it's the South African version of it. It'll do the same type of science, okay? So it's presently being built in the Karoo. And finally, the SKA has not yet been built, and I worry that it won't be built, but I think it will be. Anyway, so at the moment, there are really just 3 radio telescopes, and they are Ghana, Hartrail, and Meerkat. Meerkat is functional, and they are expanding it to 100 kilometers with 100 dishes, and that'll make it the preeminent radio telescope in the Southern Hemisphere when it's finished. I remember giving this talk to people in Russia back in, 2012, and somebody asked me in the audience, "Are you guys really going to build a telescope?" They honestly couldn't believe that an African country was going to spend money into astronomy, radio astronomy in particular. Anyways, that was kind of an interesting experience there too. So this is the only science I'm going to show you. It's really not my science, but it'll demonstrate what I did for most of my life in Hartrail. The spectrum you see on the left is of a maser towards the star forming region G9.62. It doesn't matter. Anyways, I would look at 2,000 hours of those spectra every year. So 99% boredom. And then on the right rather, you create these dynamic spectra, which helps you to understand how it is varying. And that variation can tell you things like, is it periodic? Is the velocity changing? All sorts of things. And the picture on the right was made by my good friend Sharmila Goodhart. She joined Hartrail after I had left. And basically, as a graduate student, PhD student, she discovered that these sources we were monitoring were in fact periodic. And that had never been found. That was the discovery of 25 years. So it was a quarter-century discovery. The first major discovery was that maser, that spectrum you see on the left by Carl Menton in 1991. And her discovery was in 2003. And it became basically, it's telling us something about the star formation process, that the star itself pulsates or there's interacting winds, or there's a disk with a gradient, or not a gradient, what's the word I'm looking for? a wave, a gravitational wave a density wave is traveling around the disk. We didn't know what it was exactly, but that's what she discovered. Now, can you imagine a young 19-year-old, what was she, 19, 21-year-old PhD student finding the discovery of a quarter century, and she couldn't tell anybody because she had to get 6 flare cycles before she could publish to convince people it was real. So the poor girl, and my friend told me about this in the year 2000, that they had found this periodicity, and I was going, wow, that's really cool. And she couldn't tell a soul. So when she finally published in 2003, no one believed her. They thought, how could an African telescope make such a discovery? And it was just, oh, I was pissed. When I heard that, I was pissed. There was some American astronomer wrote an article claiming that it was instrumental, it wasn't real. Anyways, it took 2 more years for another telescope to monitor other sources to discover other periodic sources. And that finally confirmed that her discovery was real. And she was finally given the accolade she rightly deserved. So that's why I show this picture of Sharmila. She just did a great job. And again, the 26-meter telescope, in radio astronomy terms, that's not very large. That really is not very large. The bigger ones like GBT are 100 meters, okay? So anyways, something else you might notice in that image is that you see these contrails, which look like, you know, the trails of a jet aircraft, and they're not parallel over time. So the x-axis is time. And the fact that they're not parallel tells us that they're red shifting or blue shifting. And I found that they were, in fact, symmetric or systematically blue shifting and red shifting, which tells us that the region is collapsing. So that was really kind of cool science. So you get 99% boredom and 1% of your life is really exciting. And that was my 1% excitement. And by the way, that dynamic spectrum on the right is the closest thing to pretty I can create. So I know when I look in a mirror, I'm not pretty, but that's as good as I can get, okay? And the other thing that I got to do at Hart Trail was I got to help teach summer schools, and you get lots of students. And I used to teach high school kids how to do my work because my work was so easy that even high school kids could process the data. And one of my students discovered something in this source that led to me finding the variation in the velocity that got him 2 publications in high school. So he published 2 papers in monthly notices, Royal Astronomical Society, before he graduated from high school. So it just goes to show you, you don't have to be a PhD to publish. You just don't. Anyways, that was kind of cool. And in the teaching and training, you really get a chance to start really understanding how observing is done. And when you don't do that, and at a small observatory like Hart Trail, you're really isolated. You wind up just getting lost in your little world. So you really have to have students around to make yourself a little bit more affordable. And you become a little eccentric, like I did. I'm a little weird. Like if you get to know me, which you won't, I'm a little weird. I live by myself. I stay away from humanity. I'm just a little different. And I spent a lot of my time on these. So when I was in Mexico, I was on Sierra Negra. I would climb up the mountain to 4,500 meters, and we would check the weather equipment and stuff like that to see what the winds were doing or the cloud cover was and whatnot, to see if it was, you know, good enough for millimeter astronomy. And then there was other sites, one here, the one in Namibia, Aus, it's a population of 200 people. We wanted to build the Cherenkov telescope array there. That was our bid for Namibia. And I was assisting them. And that farm on that little precipice there is about 200,000 acres owned by a very old 80-year-old Namibian woman who didn't like neighbors. She said to us, we'll give you the land, but you have to promise never to visit me. It was just, and I'm thinking to myself, you got 200,000 acres. She's 80 years old. Okay. Anyways, we weren't successful in the end, so she didn't have to have us see us driving by her house every now and then. So I'm sure she's happy. That was 10 years ago. I'm sure she's still alive. The other 2 places the Sawney Pass is in Lesotho. Okay. And so they have this little road there. That road had been an improvement from the one that was there originally. So in 2015, 2016, something like that, myself and my boss, we drove up the Sawney Pass to about 3,100 meters to see if there are any decent sites in Lesotho where we could do millimeter astronomy. You guys might have seen in the newspaper in the last year or so, the picture of the black hole at the center of M87 or at the center of our galaxy. Well, those people want to make movies of the variations of the black hole. And to do that, they need more baselines. And one of the problems they have is there's no telescopes in Africa that can do millimeter. And Africa's geography doesn't lend itself to millimeter because it doesn't have a lot of high sites, especially in southern Africa. Okay, so Lesotho at 3,100 meters was as good as it's going to get. The Namibian site was about 2,000 plus meters on the Humsberg. And in fact, so I was tasked with going and doing site verification. So my job was to go to the sites, see if we could, what resources are required, blah, 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 whatever that sort of story. And the Namibian site, before I could even start doing my job, the Dutch decided to build in Namibia. They didn't even care about the other sites. So I thought, well, I'm out. You don't need my services if you've already chosen. Anyways, and they really screwed up. They made the one mistake you never make when you're building a telescope on property. Ask permission. anyways, okay. So, but they will build eventually, but they didn't ask permission. So I just shook my head. And it's like deja vu all over again. Who was it? Yogi Berra said that. Because the same thing happened in South Africa for the SK project. Anyways, but I won't go into detail. I got to stay on topic. Otherwise, we'll never get anything done. And the last picture you see here is the saddle of Kilimanjaro. So it's the area between Mwenzi and Uhuru Peak, and it's at about 4,500 meters to 4,700 meters. It's an area of about 20 square miles, and it really looks a lot like the Atacama Desert, except it's not quite as dry. Okay, so it's the highest. Well, let me say this differently. It's probably the best site in Africa for millimeter astronomy, and it's probably of the order of Mauna Kea, because the weather tends to go around it. All right. So why would I want Kilimanjaro? The answer is simple. High and dry. Very simple. You want to be above the atmosphere for millimeter. Okay. Same with optical. You want to be above all the stuff that's going to cause attenuation. So you want to be high and dry. And there's very few sites at 4,500 plus meters. Mount Kenya has a very good site, a reasonable site. Problem is, it's part of a mountain range, and the weather system goes over the mountain range, dumping a hell of a lot of rain on the top. So it's not as good a site as they say. And anyways, that's sort of the way it is. Now, again, you got to ask. Remember, I just said this a moment ago. We made the mistake, maybe you got to ask. And so when I was in the government, I was asked to give a presentation to the Tanzanian delegation from their science ministry, and they wanted to join the SKA project. And they were not able to, because we had already pre-selected where we wanted our outstations. Okay, so I said to them, listen, you can help out, whatever, but I said, you've got the highest freestanding mountain in the world. Why not just do astronomy yourself? And I thought they're just going to tell me to bugger off. I thought they're going to say, hey, it's us, whatever. And they said, can we? I was amazed. So within 24 hours, I was able to contact people, and I had been offered a telescope. I was asked to come to a conference, and the Russians were begging me to come and talk to them as well, because all wanted to build millimeter sites in Africa. The telescope eventually went to Greenland, just so you know, because it took us too long. This is 2010. And so they went back to Tanzania, hired my buddy, Norali Jiwaji. So he and I eventually have been running this project now for 13 years. So this is my contribution to the JIRA Foundation, is to carry on with helping the Tanzanians build a telescope in Tanzania. So it's not necessarily money we're looking for this. It's they want my experience of going up mountains. Okay. So that's what we did. But before I could go up the mountain, and I actually went up in 2012 just on my own personal, just to see what it's really like up at Kilimanjaro. But before I could get real permission to go on this mountain to do a science test, a science expedition, I had to ask the government. And the science ministry was very keen, but the tourism ministry controlled that mountain. And they gave me 3 issues, and you can guess what they are. The first one is you can't hurt the environment because it's an UNESCO protected site. The whole mountain is protected by UNESCO. The second is you can't affect the beauty of the mountain. So we couldn't build a structure that would be seen in the silhouette of the mountain. Can you imagine? We're not going to build a telescope that big. And finally, it had to be economically viable. It couldn't cost Tanzania any money. Now, there's where my business mind starts kicking in. And I kept saying to myself, you cannot build a road. Roads are ugly. Let me see if I can show you one. Let's go backwards. There, the Sawney Pass. If you look at the Sawney Pass, you'll see there's a road winding up. They're freaking ugly. And you can't make money from those things. Who in the hell is going to pay money to go up that road? So that didn't make any sense. And I kept thinking, how the hell am I going to get a 30-ton telescope up to 5,000 meters or 4,500 meters through a rainforest that's protected? The answer was cable car, because I could use helicopter to put the stanchions on so I could minimize my environmental impact going up the mountain. Okay, so this was really cool because the project suddenly changed from a science project to a tourism project. We were literally suggesting rebranding Kilimanjaro as a leisure destination. So here we are, my friend and I were presenting to the Ministry of Tourism, and we said, listen, we want to build $1 billion of infrastructure to build a $10 million telescope. And they were just like, you know, you're freaking crazy. And I said, well, hang on, let me explain. And then I started explaining to them, if we can build this, Kilimanjaro has no 5-star hotels around it. If you go to Kilimanjaro today, you will get bed breakfast at best. That's as good as it gets for hotels in the area. And there's not many of them, and only about 25,000 people a year climb the mountain. Okay, maybe 30. And that generates $50 million a year for the Tanzanian economy. But if we built the cable car to the saddle, we could increase that to about 1 million visitors a year. That means 3 million bed nights, which represents an economy of something like $4 billion if you include the economic multiplier effect. And this is not astronomy, I know that. But the point is, this became very exciting for the business side, not just the science. And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. I mean, I had journalists coming up, shaking my hand. I was like, wow, I feel like some kind of rock star or something. It was crazy. Anyways, and I was probably, actually, I wore pants that day, I must admit. I wore pants. That was the difference. I did wear pants because I was at the ministry and I knew better. Anyways, but so I'm all giddy. I'm excited. I'm happy because they're very excited about this project, which means they'll give me permission to start testing the site for astronomy. But then I went to sleep and I woke up in a cold sweat because, you know, when you learn to do business projects in Africa, you start recognizing that if there's money to be made, somebody else will want it and they will take it from you. Now, we just wanted the telescope. And I said to my friend the next day, I said, we got a problem. And he's going, no, what? And I explained to him, I said, someone will take this from us, the cable car, they'll take it. And I said, just remember, our goal is to build the telescope. We don't care about the cable car. Let them have it. Let them have the hotels and the science centers and all that stuff. We just want the telescope. Anyways, and sure to 2 weeks later, we get a letter saying, you have to justify building a second cable car. And I go, what? What do you mean second? Okay, so somebody had gone right out of the meeting, went to the government in another angle, got permission to build a cable car. And we were cut out of the project. And we tried for 3 years to get onto that board so we could at least direct it to the saddle where it would help us convey our telescope. We weren't lucky at that, unfortunately, but they did give us permission to go up the mountain. So, as I said, I went up in 2012 on my own personal account, and I took my daughter and one of my nieces, and the guide Ado was with us as well. You could see me there, very casual looking. And then in 2022, I took a science expedition up the mountain to do site qualification, more importantly, to look at the infrastructure. You know, did it have power? Did it have water? Was it a good site for astronomy? So we did that in 2022. And before I go on, I want to make something very clear. Everybody thinks Kilimanjaro is an easy climb. That is not true. Not true at all. Okay. It is a dangerous climb because the moment you go above 5,000 meters, you're putting your life in peril. Okay. High altitude sickness is it's a real thing. And the first time I went, I was very fit. I'd been playing first division rugby. I was 50 years old. And I sailed up the mountain. But my daughter she made it to the top, but she got sick along the way, but she still made it. My niece had to turn back at 5,000 meters. She got very ill, couldn't go further. In the second group, a couple only got to the saddle and turned back. One guy, I don't think he realized how close to death he actually was. He started getting hypothermia probably just before we got to Gilman's Peak at about 5,400 meters or something like this. But it was basically altitude sickness setting in. But luckily for him, great guy, he eventually made it through and survived. Unfortunately, one of our colleagues had to turn back at 2,700 meters at Mandara. And the one guy made it to Kibo Huts, went back, and a week after he got home, he died of a heart attack. So we don't know if it was associated with the climb that weakened his heart, but I hope not, because I would feel bloody guilty of all that. And he was a great guy. So I really miss him, regrettably. So if you're climbing Kilimanjaro, you've got to try to get some fitness in you, and you want to acclimatize to altitude. So if you ever just choose to go early and spend a couple extra days at 2,000 meters. It'll increase your chances of success by a hell of a lot. So yeah, and there it is. Anyways, so I want to show you some videos now, because I've been rambling. Let's just see some videos. So this is us going up the mountain in 2022. So there are us at the start. We're in the rainforest. There's a little rodent that lives in the trees. We're getting a picture of it. And here we are at Mandara Hut at 2,700 meters. Regrettably, you cannot hear me breathing in these videos. It's really too bad. And that may sound weird and creepy, but the reason is as you go up in altitude, your breathing becomes harder and harder. So just by the videos, you can tell I'm having trouble breathing going up the mountain. Okay, so that's Mandara Hut. And we're just at the top of the rainforest at Mandara Hut. Oh, let's start back and go on. Okay. Yeah. So now we're climbing to Harumbo, which is 3,700 meters. And just so you know, these guys, the porters, they work. Me, I walked. They work. I mean, they're carrying 25 or 40 kilograms on their head, plus their own gear. And you got a little day pack with a bit of water, you know, you look like, oh, geez. And they make you look like an idiot. I saw a guy, I was like, half the time you're like this. You're on your knees taking a breath. You're going, holy Jesus Christ, this is and here's this dude, he's got a cigarette in the side of his mouth, cell phone at his ear, walking past you with a 40 kilogram pack on his head. And you make it. So I take my hat off to these guides. These guys are incredible. The porters, the guides, the cooks, all of them. Absolutely amazing people. And they get paid next to bugger all. I mean, in 2012, I think they got paid for 6 days work, $20 for 6 days work. Just to give you an idea. The lead guide got $100 for 6 days. And it's worth it. And almost all of them are doing some kind of a degree in ecology or science or, you know, anything. They're all using this to pay their way through university. So they're all looking to better them. They really are. It's a really interesting place and very positive, very, very positive. All right, so now we're on the saddle. So now we're above 4,500 meters. And if you could hear this video, you can hear I'm sucking air. It's terrible. I really felt old in this video, I got to tell you. It was hard. It was really hard. And in fact, I actually got it in my pocket. I don't think you'll be able to see it. You can come and look at it after if you want. I have a piece of Kilimanjaro with me. You can't see it. I don't know if anybody can see it. You'll have to come and look at it. But it's basically a crystal. It's only found in 3 parts of the world: a volcano in Antarctica, Mount Kenya, and Mount Kilimanjaro. And I found it because as I was walking up this stupid mountain, and I had to take breaks every 10 minutes, I was doing this. And I was saying, oh no, I'm just looking for rocks. And I found it. So it was kind of funny. But as I said, altitude does kill. And here's a poor chap coming down the mountain. He was being taken down. And every step down the mountain, you get a little bit more air, a little bit more energy. And I don't know whatever happened to that person, but I do know someone the night before we summited died on the mountain. So it can be quite nasty. So here we are at Kibo Hut itself. This is that was 2012. And here, this picture is from 2022. The difference is it's mostly tents in 2012. And in 2022, you see huts. So the development on Kilimanjaro has been quite substantial. When somebody says to me, Gordon, look, you're putting a telescope in a very, pristine environment, you're going to destroy. I tell people to just calm down a bit, because they're going to double the number of caps, the places there eventually. And in fact, stupid, they actually dragged fiber optic cable up the entire mountain through the rainforest, hanging on trees. They didn't even trench. They just dragged it right up the mountain where the animals could chew on it. And also, so at Kibo Hut, I could use my WhatsApp and my Wi-Fi. And by the way, after I went down, they now have the fiber right to the peak of Kilimanjaro. So if you go there, you'll be at the top. You can use your Wi-Fi, their Wi-Fi, for free. Anyways, this is what I want to talk about really. In the real difficulty of Kilimanjaro really is these 6 hours between Kibo Hut and Uhura Peak, because there's a section, and these people are busy talking, but that's not going to matter. Hold on, let me just play this. What am I doing? Anyways, what they're basically telling you, which you can't hear, is that they see really clear skies, they see the stars, but they know they got 6 hours of hiking ahead of them, and they're only going to see the heels of the people in front of them. So a guide stands in front, gives you a cadence. Here you go. You see them walking. And you basically only see the image of the person's heels who's standing in front of you. And you do that for 6 hours. Okay. And you'll see it here in a moment. And I'll just let it play out. It's really too bad you couldn't hear this, because they don't know what to expect. There it is there. Okay. So that's my view that I had for 6 hours, and I did it twice. The first time I did it, I didn't know. So I wasn't ready for it at all, and I was a little fitter. The second time, I knew what I was getting into. And as I got up to Kibo Hut, my anxiety levels were rising, because I was getting to the point where, oh no, shit, I got to do this all over again. This is going to hurt. It's tiring. You start walking at midnight, and you spend an hour getting to this scree field, because you're just zigzagging across this for 6 hours, and then 1 hour to get to the peak once you're above this scree field. Okay, so it's an old volcano, right? Anyways, oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's 6 hours I cannot get back. It was terrible. And I saw Seba, my student, I saw his heels for 6 hours. And by the way, you might think, I'll put some earbuds in, listen to some music. I got to tell you, that's a no-no, because You have to have the rhythm of the person in front of you. If anything takes your mind off that rhythm, you stumble because you trip on the person in front of you. And at 5,000 plus meters, to recover from even a slight stumble takes so much energy. It's horrible. And so you end up having to stop and get reset. And so in the end, you have to blank your mind and then just walk for 6 hours. And so, and you're walking literally at the pace I'm walking now, very, very slowly. Oh man, it was terrible. I don't think I can do that justice. But this is what you get to see once you survive those 6 hours. This is a view from, and by the way, just so you know, you'll see the glacier in a moment. Just so, where is it now? I can't see where the hell I'm looking at. There it is. There's the glacier in the background. So that's the glacier there, and it's still there. It's receding, but it's still there. And that's, I was saying this earlier to your president, that is a very political topic in Tanzania. So I don't touch that argument at all. I don't get involved in talking about climate change. That's a big no-no, because they are very touchy about people talking about their glacier. So I say nothing, because otherwise it'll affect my project. When I climbed at 2012, the temperature at the top before sunrise was -25. Okay, so it's chilly because you're high altitude and there was wind, and you can see the frost on the ground here. But when you climb, what you're really looking to do is get this photograph to prove that you're alive and you made it. Okay, so here I am twice. And listen, I'm not bragging. I did not want to climb this mountain a second time. I just wanted to go to the saddle and look for astronomy sites. But my buddies, Shep, forced me to go up the mountain with them because I had done it before and they needed me to help guide them. My God, it was horrible. Bastard, I want to kill him. Anyways, and I might have to do it again. That'll be even worse. The only comfort I have is when we do it again, he will know how hard it is. So then I won't feel like I'm all alone on this. Anyways, the first time you can see my daughter and I present with our guide. And the second time you can see myself with Chep. I'm overdressed in the first one and I'm underdressed in the second one. And no, I did not climb up Kilimanjaro in bare feet. That is not true. And I also wore sweats. So for this photo, it was once the sunrise, the temperature just shoots up to 10 above. And for me, I like the cold. So the first time I climbed, I overdressed because I didn't know how bad it would be. And I thought, to hell with all that. I didn't wear all that extra crap like the toque and 2 pairs of socks and all this other junk. I just said, screw it. I just put a pair of sweats over my shorts. I had my hiking boots and a pair of socks, and up I went. And I was okay. So that's kind of what you see, but I was definitely not walking up in bare feet. It was chilly. As I said, one of our members in 2022 almost died because of hypothermia and high altitude sickness. So that's the main picture. But once you, okay, let me get down here. Get out here. So now we're coming down, and every step down, you feel better. Really, it's amazing. You get a little bit more oxygen, a little bit more energy. Your life, is it playing or what's it doing here? Oh, do I? Okay, well, how do I get rid of the top bar? Do I do it? Okay, well, it's going. Let us do its thing. And so here you can see us, there's people in front of us going down, and then we get to that scree field again, and it's really a lot of fun. It's like skiing. You get to a point where it took you 6 hours to come up, but it takes you 1.5 hours to 2 hours to come down. You just run down it. And it's tiring only on your legs because, of course, it's like skiing for 2 hours solid. Okay, and here you are just hammering it down the hill. And every step down, you're feeling a little better. My poor daughter she was exhausted. We had to help carry her in parts of it. Yeah, even coming down, it's tiring. And so from here, you go down to Kibo Hut. And this is about an hour hike to Kibo. And then from there, you go straight down to Arumbo again. And there you eventually go down the next night, or the next day, you go down to the rainforest and the gate, and you get the hell out of this madness called climbing Kilimanjaro. And that was our story in 2012. as I said to you, we wanted in 2022, we wanted to know what the infrastructure was like. We wanted to know, were there buildings, was there Wi-Fi, power, water, et cetera. Most importantly, we needed to know how good the road was. Because as I said, the cable car was out. It was going elsewhere. Didn't help us. So we needed to see if the road was any good. And I'll give you a hint. The answer is no. And let me show you. So the grade is about 25 degrees. There's potholes everywhere. It's too narrow. There's bridges that are only 1 lane wide. And it's like that for 1 hour, straight downhill. When I climbed up the first time, just so you know, I got blisters on my heels going up, and I got blisters on my toes going down, because you're just going downhill for 2 days and you're going uphill for 4 days, just so you know. So the answer was, we can't use a road. So now we're in big trouble. But anyways, let's carry on down. And this is not going to make any sense, but you won't be able to hear this. They sing all these songs and stuff like this in Swahili. It's really quite fun. You can hear none of it. You can see them dancing. But this is the difference between 2012 and 2022. There was more singing on the mountain. I think they think it actually helps encouraging you to go up the mountain or something. Anyways, I didn't do much. Let me get out of there. Anyways, so what I want to do is I want to give a new possible solution to get over the rainforest. So if we can't do it with cable car, the road's no good, I can't cut down trees, the answer has to be another way to go over. And there was a technology that I had looked at a long time ago, airships, Zeppelins, you know, like the Hindenburg. And I thought, I wonder where the technology has got to. Well, I found this company. Now, let's have a look. So they are in the process of building an airship that can lift 60 tons to 3,000 meters. And so that means that basically they can get 30 tons to 5,000 meters. All right. So there's a linear drop off in the amount of weight they can carry. And I don't need a road. I don't need anything. I can pick it up off the ship that it's in the port and go straight to the telescope and land it. And more importantly, I got to meet the people from this company. I was asked to give a talk on the Kilimanjaro project in Toronto at their conference for airships. I met somebody from Winnipeg that was organizing it, and he invited me. But basically what happened was, you know, you can use the Kilimanjaro project as an advertising campaign for the company. So rather than charge us, we would do a documentary centering on their company, and that would pay for the lift up the mountain. So it was just kind of a cool solution. I liked it. I'm easy to please though, so I guess not. But anyways, and that's pretty much it to the Kilimanjaro project. Now, as I said, there's so much more. There's just some of the things, like, you know, when I was in the Congo, I was in the Congo during the last Ebola outbreak. I was actually working in the Congo at a hospital. That's really stupid, really stupid. And luckily for me, there was no Ebola patients in that area. And the ability to cross the Congo is very hard. It takes a month to drive from the north to the south. So I was quite safe, really, but I mean, it was really stupid to be there. But there's just so many more things I could talk about. I just don't want to. So I'm going to leave it there. The JIRA Foundation itself, as I said, we built one telescope now in Nigeria. It's fully operational. The students are now using it to do hydrogen. They do hydrogen line monitoring and stuff like that. That is this telescope here. It's literally the size of the one you guys got out here. Built by a company in England, transported, and we commissioned it at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. And we hope to build more. So we helped to raise the money, buy the telescope, and so on. And we helped the guys in Latvia buy a hydrogen maser. I'm helping with the Kilimanjaro project, and now we're working with a group in Japan to raise money to pay for students to use observing on some of their telescopes. So these are the sort of things that we want to do to help developing countries in astronomy, in particular radio astronomy. So thank you for your time. I hope I haven't been too boring.
All right. Thanks very much. Let's thank Gordon once again. Thank you so much, Gordon. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Throw out the astronomical trivia for tonight was actually name that lunar feature, and that was in recognition of International Observe the Moon coming up this weekend. So I'm going to just briefly show this, and then I'm going to hand things over to Mark. But anyways, everybody take a good look and see if you can name the lunar feature. Blue oval. Good answer. Good guess. Okay. Our book of the month. Mark Zelchik. Boats are you? I saw you. There he is. There you are, sir.
Hi, good evening. Well, that works out perfectly because, yeah, the book of the month is 21st Century Atlas of the Moon. So that's 2 out of the last 3 months we've had a lunar atlas as our book of the month. The library is located, when you're walking out that way, it's just to the left. It's open before and after each meeting. So the review for this book is given by Al Pankratz, who has his own copy of the book. So he kindly wrote the following review. The 21st Century Atlas of the Moon is an excellent book for everyone interested in the moon, but it's more than just a book of lunar photos and labels. A short introduction covers the basics of craters, basins, volcanism, and tectonics, but the bulk of the atlas consists of 28 sections depicting the near side using images obtained by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. All significant lunar basins, craters, rills, and features are identified, but there are fewer labels than in the duplex Lunar Atlas, which was the book of the month back in June, for example. While some might regard this as a flaw, one benefit is that it does not overwhelm the reader with too much detail. What sets the book apart are the interesting discussions of selected features that appear with each section of the lunar surface. These provide context and background and help the reader understand what they are seeing. For example, one can see that the Cirsalis rill is, quote, the longest rill and strongest magnetic anomaly on the moon, unquote, and that it is, quote, the dike that transports lavas to the Procellarum Basin and creates the magnetic anomaly, unquote. As expected, the atlas covers the areas near the limb that are also periodically visible due to the libration, and there are a few pages depicting the far side. The book itself is quill-bound and depicts the lunar surface oriented as it would be seen by the human eye or through binoculars, rather than upside down or reversed as other atlases do. There are a number of errors in the atlas that are corrected on a page of errata at the end. I find this atlas very enjoyable because it strikes a nice balance between the technical and the descriptive. It allows one to be amazed by images of the lunar surface, but it also aids in interpreting what is seen. Great, thanks, Al, for that review. So that's the book of the month, and it's available right at the conclusion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, now we'll hand things over to Abdur for our Astro Imaging Corner.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. And then if someone can let me know if they can see my screen. Okay, how's that looking? Can everyone see my screen and hear me okay?
Looks good, Abner.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so welcome to Astro Imaging Corner number 130. Just gonna see if I can hide this panel here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so okay, there we go. So for anyone who is joining us for the first time, this is the portion of the meeting where I share all the images sent in by RASC Edmonton members, and you can send your images to the link on our RASC Edmonton Center website. Our first image for today is from Rick Bram, and this is an image of the partial solar eclipse that happened just recently. And you can see some sunspots there as well as the moon at the bottom of the image. And Rick took this using a Canon 5D Mark IV with a telephoto lens at 300 millimeters and a 200x teleconverter, 2x teleconverter. So that's effective 600 millimeter focal length. And Rick was using a Thousand Oaks solar filter, and this was all processed in AutoStacker and Photoshop. So great shot there, Rick. Our next image is from Ray Wiens. This is the Wizard Nebula, and this was actually captured at the Northern Prairie Star Party and included about 3 hours of data with a QHY 268 camera and Ray's William Optics 132 millimeter scope. And the focal length was 924 millimeters for this one, and it was stacked in APP and processed in Lightroom. Another shot from Ray. This is NGC 7331 as well as Stefan's Quintet. So that's near the bottom right of the image. You can see those 5 galaxies colliding, and you can also see that tidal tail coming off near the middle of one of those galaxies. So very, very nice capture there, Ray. And this was a total of 25 images of 5 minutes each, shot with a QHY 268 camera. And this was with the same 132 millimeter refractor, and again stacked in APP and processed in Lightroom. So very, very nice detail there. Up next is one more shot from Ray. This is M106. And actually at the top, near the top right of the image, you can also see Comet Lemon. And this was shot with the same equipment, and the total data was 60 minutes, exposures of various focal lengths from 60 seconds to 360 seconds. And this was captured just recently on October 14 at 5 a.m. So great capture. Up next, we have an image from Denis. This is the Crescent Nebula. And this is a combination of RGB, hydrogen alpha, S2, and O3 filtered images. And this was with the FLT 132 at f7, and this was taken at the Northern Prairie Star Party. And Denny was using a William Optics Z61 guider and a corrector, and Player One Mars camera, that's the ASI 290. And again, amazing amount of detail there. And at the very right of the image there, I think it might be cut off on the screen here, but you can see half of a bubble. That's the Soap Bubble Nebula, much less well known than the Crescent Nebula in that region. So beautiful shot and excellent processing there. And another very, very tough target. This is the Squid and Flying Bat. Having imaged this myself, I know just how faint this is. So to be able to get this much detail out of it is quite an accomplishment. So excellent work there again, Denis. And this was taken at the Northern Prairie Star Party over 3 nights. And this is a total of 15 hours of LRGB and SHO images with the ASI 2600mm camera. And Denny said that he had to re-image a few of the hours to get better quality data. So in total, it was about 11 hours of data for this image. And this was with a William Optics 81mm refractor with a reducer and Antlia 3 nanometer filters. And yeah, just an amazing amount of detail there. Up next is an image from Alan Hobbs. This is Sharpless 132. Also, I believe known as the Lion Nebula, and it's located in the southern portion of Cepheus, and it's primarily an emission nebula, and it's estimated to be about 10,000 light years away in the Perseus arm of the Milky Way galaxy. And 2 Wolf-Rayet stars have been identified in this Lionhead Nebula, and they're responsible for ionizing the gas in this region. And the Lion Nebula is in Cepheus. It's believed to be a region of new star formation. And for another example of a Wolf-Rayet star, that Crescent Nebula that we just saw earlier from Denny is also an example of a Wolf-Rayet star and the nebula being generated by that. And this image was also taken at the Northern Prairie Star Party, and this was a total of 59 subs of 1 minute each, so about 1 hour of integration time. And this was taken with Allen's RASC 8 and the ASI 2600 MC camera with an opt-long L-enhance filter. And processing was done in PixInsight and Photoshop. Great job as usual, Alan. Up next, we have some images of the recent eclipse in white light from Murray Paulson. And these were all taken in San Pedro, Belize with a Canon 80D using a William Optics scope and a 1.4 teleconverter. So this is when the eclipse was well underway. This was almost at totality. Well, at totality, and then as the eclipse is ending. So very nice. Thank you for sharing, Murray. Up next, we have a very nice, very detailed shot here using a spectroheliograph from Brian Martin. And this is in H-alpha, showing a lot of filaments and fibrils and speculae. And this was taken with the SZGV2 at a spectral resolution of 0.1 angstroms on the SV102 refractor. And that's a 714 millimeter focal length. So amazing amount of detail. And thank you for sharing. And then we have a couple of Milky Way shots from Brian as well. So this first one here, this was an old schoolhouse near Holden, and it's about 15 kilometers east of Black Nugget Lake, and taken during the week of the Northern Prairie Star Party. And this was a composite of 6 panels using the Ioptron Sky Tracker on a Canon 6D and a Samyang 24 millimeter lens. And each frame was 2 minutes in duration, and each panel was a sum of 3 frames. Up next, this is the Milky Way over Lake O'Hara, taken on the eve of the autumn equinox. And a waxing crescent moon was just behind the edge of the mountain, creating a bright glow in the lower right of the frame. And this was a composite of 9 panels, each panel consisting of 15 untracked frames. And the images were taken with a Canon 7D Mark II and a Sigma Art lens at 14 millimeter. So again, very, very nice shot. Up next, another shot of the Milky Way from Brian, and this was above Elizabeth Parker Alpine Club of Canada hut near Lake O'Hara. And this one is a composite of 12 panels, and each panel consisted of 15 untracked frames. And the images were taken with a Canon 7D Mark II and the Sigma Art lens as well. And the last shot from Brian, this is a panorama of Orion, and Brian said the level of snoring in the cabin drove him outside to take this panorama of Orion over top the hut at 4:30 a.m. A very frosty but magnificent sky. This was a composition of 12 panels, and each panel consisting of 15 untracked frames with a Canon 7D and the same lens as before. So absolutely beautiful. Brian, if you ever want to do a tutorial video on making composites like this, I'll be the first to join. I struggled with that in the past. So again, beautiful shots. Thank you for sharing. Up next, we have a shot from Daisy. This is Aurora and Jupiter. So you can see the bright Jupiter at the right side of the frame. And Daisy said that this was not planned. She just did a point and shoot when Jay called her out to see the Aurora. And these are raw images, not adjusted or stacked or anything. And this was the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So very, very nice. Amazing what phones can do these days. Up next is a shot from Warren Finley, and Warren said that stepping out that night on September 18 to set up his scope, he looked up at the sky and saw an all-sky aurora. So he switched gears and grabbed his camera gear instead and got the single capture of this aurora above an old farmstead building. So I absolutely love the composition, and yeah, that farmstead building really really adds to this image. So very, very nice. Thank you for sharing. And this is one of my images. Apologies to anyone who's already seen it. And this was one that I had taken just before I went to the Northern Prairie Star Party. And I try not to image the same target more than once these days, but I had a chance to redo this target because I was able to get 10 times more data this time than my last attempt. And for this one, I was using my Orion 8-inch reflector and the ASI 294mm Pro. And this was a total of 28 hours of my best data using the monochrome LRGB and HA filters. And this was captured in Nina and processed entirely in PixInsight. And this was taken from my backyard in Cochrane, Alberta over almost a 1 month period. And in the next image, I zoomed in a little bit on a very, very tiny chunk of the entire image. I think the entire image was 183 megapixels. So this is a very, very large image. So this, again, apologies if anyone's already heard my stories, but I absolutely love this star in the Andromeda Galaxy just because of its history. And just a quick summary of its history. In 1912, Henrietta Swan Leavitt had discovered the relationship between a Cepheid variable's period and its true luminosity. And using that later on, Edwin Hubble had calculated the distance to the Andromeda Galaxy using this labeled star that I captured in my image. And he determined, comparing this star to other Cepheid variables in our own galaxy, that the Andromeda Galaxy was way, way far away, much further than people at the time thought, and that it was not just some small nebula within the Milky Way. So at the time, Hubble had been using the world's largest telescope, the 100-inch Hooker telescope. But today, with the advances in technology over the last century, I mean, the amateurs like me are able to capture images like this from our backyards. So you can see this, I think the star is magnitude 18.5, or at least it was at the time Hubble imaged it. So I think it's probably about the same or maybe a bit fainter in my image over here. But yeah, showed up quite well. And then you can see all the red nebulae and all those star clusters and countless other individual stars in Andromeda as well. And last image for tonight is this shot of the Pleiades I'd gotten at the Northern Prairie Star Party. And this was with my Canon 6D camera and a Rokinon 135mm lens. And this was only about 3 hours of exposures on an Ioptron Skyguider. And I managed to capture way more dust than I was actually expecting in that area. I did not realize there was that much nebulosity and dust around the Pleiades. I'd mostly just seen the nebulosity around the bright stars in the Pleiades, but yeah, it's quite a surprise. So a huge thank you to anyone who sent in some images, and I'm hoping to see a lot more next time. So just send them over before our next meeting, and I'll be sure to include them in our next Astro Imaging Corner. So thank you, everyone, and back to you, Jay.
Okay. Thank you, Abdur. And if anyone's wondering exactly how dark the skies get out at Black Nugget Lake, there's your evidence. It's can be absolutely amazing out there. So, okay. We're in the home stretch. Although I want to go back to our trivia. Okay, astronomical trivia. So lunar features. Any guesses from anyone? Not lunar X? No. Anyone?
Montes Apenninus, I think. I don't know how to pronounce the mountain names.
Somebody said what? Good guess. That's what it is. It's the Apennines mountain range, stretches about 900 kilometers across the lunar surface. And yeah, when the light hits it right, it casts some pretty nice shadows. So that's the mountain range here. And just that's where it's actually located on the lunar surface. So something to observe if you can. Okay, just on to our upcoming events. So International Observe the Moon's coming up on October 21st. And again, Frank will be opening the RASCO And we would like to have some telescopes out on the front lawn here if we could. So if you're interested, come on out. If you have any questions about it, I'm not sure what time. Jeff, what time are they starting? So about 7 p.m. on the 21st, Saturday, the 21st. So if you'd like to bring out your telescopes and share some observations of the moon with the general public, please do so. If you have any questions, reach out to Jeff Robertson, their public education director. Astro Imaging Cafe coming up. So this is before our next meeting, Astro Imaging Cafe this Wednesday. So today's the 18th with Richard Covey. And it's all about planetary imaging. So if planetary imaging's an interest of yours, the Zoom link in that is on the website. We have our monthly What's Up Over Edmonton with Jeff Robertson, Wednesday, November 1st. And our observers meeting on Wednesday, November 8th, hosted by John Stolte or Alberta Beltran. And our next monthly meeting will be on Monday, November 13th. So we should have an interesting lineup there that day as well. So if nobody has anything else, I thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I will call our meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.